Have you ever heard a story about a ghost? Many of us have. These tales are exciting. They are mysterious. They often involve spooky old houses, rattling chains, spirits from beyond the grave. Science, however, tells a different kind of story. When scientists look at these events, they often use a different name. They do not call them ghosts. They call them apparitional experiences. This might sound like a complicated term, but the idea is simple. It describes an event where a person sees, hears, senses something that is not physically there. It is an experience of an appearance, an apparition. This choice of words is very important. The word ghost comes with a lot of baggage. It immediately suggests that a dead person's spirit has returned to our world. It assumes a specific cause for the experience, survival after death. The scientific study of these strange events is not new. It began more than a century ago, in the late 1800s. It was a time of great change, when new discoveries in science were challenging old beliefs. A group of thoughtful scholars and scientists in England decided to tackle the question of ghosts head-on. In 1882, they formed the Society for Psychical Research. Their goal was to use the methods of science to investigate phenomena that seemed to defy normal explanation. They wanted to be careful, rigorous, unbiased in their search for the truth, whatever that truth might be. Three key figures led this early work: Edmund Gurney, Frederick W. H. Myers, Frank Podmore. These men were not gullible believers. They were sharp-minded scholars who were skeptical of easy answers. They did not just collect spooky stories. They conducted what they called a census of hallucinations, gathering thousands of first-hand reports from ordinary people. Among the thousands of reports collected by the early researchers, one type stood out as particularly compelling. These were the crisis cases. A crisis case is an apparitional experience that happens at a time of great danger, distress, death. For example, a mother in London might suddenly see a clear vision of her son, only to learn later that he was killed in a battle overseas at that exact moment. The sheer number of these cases, and the striking coincidences in timing, made researchers wonder if something more than imagination was at play. These cases seemed to hint at a hidden form of communication. Frederick Myers proposed a radical idea. He coined the term telepathy, feeling at a distance. In a moment of extreme emotion or crisis, a person's mind might be able to send a signal, a thought, an image, a feeling. The receiving mind would translate the raw signal into a full sensory experience. The sight of the person, the sound of their voice, the feeling of their touch. The apparition, not a ghost, but a telepathic message made real by the perceiver's mind. Classic example: a woman at home reads a book. She looks up and sees her brother in the doorway, pale and sad. He vanishes after a moment. A few hours later, a telegram arrives with news he died several hundred miles away at that exact time. Section 4. Building a Ghost. The Mind as a Stage. As research continued into the 20th century, thinkers began to develop more sophisticated psychological models to explain these experiences. One of the most influential was G.N.M. Tyrrell, an English physicist and parapsychologist. Writing in the 1940s and 50s, Tyrrell agreed that apparitions were not external spirits. He was convinced they were hallucinations. However, he did not think they were meaningless tricks of the mind. He saw them as complex, structured productions created by the deeper, unconscious parts of our own psyche for a specific purpose. To explain this, Tyrrell used a brilliant metaphor: the stage carpenter. He imagined the mind as a kind of theater. The conscious self is the audience, watching the play of everyday reality unfold on the stage. But behind the scenes, there is a hidden crew, the unconscious mind. This crew, the stage carpenter, has access to information that the conscious mind does not. In a crisis case, for example, this unconscious part of the mind might receive a telepathic signal. Section 5. Sorting the Shadows. A taxonomy of the unseen. By the latter half of the 20th century, The field had a huge number of case reports, but lacked a clear, systematic way to organize them. Two researchers at Oxford, Celia Green, Charles McCreery, set out to change that. In the 1970s, they conducted new surveys and analyzed thousands of accounts, both old and new. Their goal was to create a taxonomy of apparitional experiences. A taxonomy is a system of classification, like how a biologist sorts animals into species, genera, families. They wanted to map different types of experiences and identify common features. Their work revealed apparitional experiences were far more varied and far more common than most people believed. They were not just about seeing full-fledged figures. People also reported disembodied voices, strange smells, a sudden drop in temperature, a powerful sense of a presence in a room. Green and McCreery cataloged these sensory experiences. They paid close attention to the state of the person having the experience. Many apparitions occurred not during fear or excitement, but during mundane moments. Washing dishes, reading a book, driving a car. Section 6. Not like the movies. What real apparitions are like. When we strip away the folklore and the Hollywood special effects, what is a typical apparitional experience actually like? Based on the careful collection of thousands of first-hand reports over more than a century, a clear picture emerges. And it is a picture that is often quieter, stranger, more personal than the ghost stories we are used to. The reality is less about horror and more about a quiet tear in the fabric of the everyday world, a brief moment when the ordinary rules of perception seem to be suspended. First, the setting is usually completely normal. Far from happening in a creepy, abandoned asylum at midnight, most apparitions are seen in the witness's own home. They happen in brightly lit living rooms, kitchens, bedrooms. The person is often engaged in a completely routine activity, like making a cup of tea, watching television. They are not expecting to see anything unusual. This element of surprise in a familiar setting is a key feature. Second, the apparition itself is often strikingly realistic. Many people report that, for the first few moments, they believed they were seeing a real, living person. The figure does not look like a transparent floating sheet. It appears solid, three-dimensional, perfectly integrated into the environment. Section 7. The end of the story. Open questions, not easy answers. So, where does this leave us? We have moved from the simple, dramatic idea of a ghost to the more nuanced and complex concept of an apparitional experience. We have seen that these events are not just stories, but real, documented aspects of human psychology. Gurney, Tyrrell, Green. They showed that these events often happen in crisis, are constructed by the mind like a play, are usually much quieter and more personal than their fictional counterparts. They are, in essence, a form of hallucination, structured, meaningful, connected to our deepest relationships. The scientific approach does not provide one single, easy answer. Instead, it offers a set of powerful ideas. The hallucination model explains why the experience is private and leaves no physical trace. The stage carpenter metaphor helps us understand how a hallucination can be so detailed and realistic. And the controversial idea of telepathy attempts to explain the uncanny coincidences of crisis cases, suggesting that information might travel between minds in ways we do not yet understand. None of these ideas is a complete explanation, but together they form a compelling framework for thinking about these mysterious events. The shift from ghost to apparitional experience is more than just a change in vocabulary. It is a change in perspective. It allows us to appreciate the profound emotional impact of these moments without having to accept a supernatural explanation.